Welcome back to Otaku Daikun. Dai here. Today we'll be continuing my guide through the Tsukihime Remake, so that folks who can't speak Japanese can still enjoy this beautiful novel. Let's not waste any more time. Last we left off, Arcuate found and slayed Roa. While Mario knows it, he doesn't tell his church colleagues, leading them on a pointless hunt. Normally, when a vamp dies, its lesser familiars should die off too, but that's not happening. The reason why is Shiki. He's becoming the new host for Roa, and as Roa's memories continue to flood into him, his behavior becomes more and more erratic. Naive to this, Shiki starts helping Arcuate hunt the dead despite promising Ciel he'd stay out of it. Noel, after being bitten by Vlav, is paranoid and violent. Ciel asked Mario to take care of her, so he responds to her unstable condition by threatening to send her to a convent. With little time to spare, she hopes to seek revenge upon Roa before she's transferred out of the city. Shiki starts his morning feeling like crap, thinking he must have had a nightmare from the book he read last night. Just like a dream, though, he can't seem to recall what it entailed. His condition is bad enough that Hisui suggests he take the day off, but as usual, he acts like he's fine. After all, if he goes to school, he can see Ciel again. When he goes to wash his face, he notices the bathroom mirror, the one he looked in just the other day, is now gone. Ominously, when he asks Hisui about it, she notes she threw the old one out and hasn't installed a replacement yet. It seems Shiki broke it while he was being controlled by Roa, and doesn't even remember. At breakfast, poor Kohaku eagerly tries to make him food that he can actually taste. Sadly, his nausea isn't helping things either. Instead, he asks for some vitamins, but perhaps he just needs some blood. Thankfully, some of Kohaku's medicine works, and as he's about to leave the mansion, Hisui looks concerned. When he asks what's up, she points out that he hasn't been wearing his glasses all morning. Wasn't that supposed to hurt him? Not as much for a vampire, I suppose. At school, Shiki spots Ciel on the staircase and tries to surprise her by lifting her up from the waist. Alarmed, her natural instincts kick in and she dodges out of the way, sending him into the wall. She's more upset than afraid, so he apologizes for the morning mischief. She forgives him, and after some small talk, she asks him to come to see her at the tea ceremony room at lunch. With a smile, she teases that she's prepared something for him. Excited, Shiki looks forward to it. Upon entering his classroom, Arihiko tells him that because there's some new sickness going around, their class is receiving a mandatory vaccination. Noel is gone, supposedly having caught the illness. Surprisingly, it turns out that Dr. Araku is the one administering the injections. The moment she spots Shiki, she jokes that it must be the red thread of fate that brought them together, but if she pulls any funny business, she'll get in trouble. Even if he wants to run away, he acknowledges he needs the vaccine, so he puts up with her antics. When it comes to the actual injection, she presents him with two options. Either a shot that's both effective and painless, or one that's weak and very painful. Should be an easy option, right? Let's just say if you choose the weak one, you'll get a bad ending further down the line. Be careful, though it is funny seeing Araku's face when you actually go for it. Anyway, Shiki makes the logical choice, the effective and painless vaccine. As she sees it, it's not the fun option, but she does her job anyway, while mentioning her love for nurse uniforms and the irresistible throbbing of an injection. He doesn't humor her behavior, and promptly gets up after getting poked. As he leaves, Araku mentions she probably won't see him for a while, that the fun days are over. Despite this being eerie as fuck, Shiki is too focused on his rendezvous with Ciel. While he wants to rush right over there, he decides to visit the school store first to get some obligatory curry bread. His hope of a pleasant surprise is shattered when he enters the tea room and finds Ciel sitting next to her pile bunker. She tells him it's a weapon against sinners, the kinds of people who break their promises. Excitedly, she shows off this weapon, the seventh holy scripture, as a means of intimidating him. It's a tool for punishing liars, or rather vampires, that she modified from its original form to act as a pile bunker. The sword we saw earlier was one of its various alternate forms, each associated with a different cause of death. Eventually, he realizes she's pissed because he went out with Arcuate, and apologizes for breaking his promise. He explains that despite what he said earlier, he still wants to help rid the town of vampires. When Arkawade told him there were more dead on the loose, he decided to help her, but admits he should have told Ciel about it. She clarifies she's not upset that he didn't tell her, but rather because he's putting himself in danger again. She wants him to live like a normal student, since he's not a trained hunter like her. At least he didn't go out on his own, though she doesn't approve of his partner. Shiki asks how she found out in the first place. Instead of admitting she saw him from afar, Ciel claims she heard it from Noel. He finds that odd considering Noel is absent today, something Ciel didn't realize until just now. It's suspicious, but Ciel puts that matter aside in order to discuss the severity of the current vampire hunt. Specifically, she wants to lecture him on both Roa and the true ancestors. Even among the dead apostles, Roa stood out as a heretic and is considered by the church an informal 28th member of the dead apostle ancestors. It's not that Roa is stronger than the other vampires, but his reincarnation makes him more troublesome. Normal vampires, despite being called immortal, can still die after their bodies are totally destroyed beyond repair. In other words, it's better to say that they can both heal and live as long as they drink blood. Roa, on the other hand, can reincarnate into another vessel so long as his soul remains intact. Even simpler, he does not die when killed. Thankfully, we had to know all of this already to appreciate Shiki's book readings, so I'll spare the more obvious details. After Roa chooses his next vessel and his body dies, his soul moves almost like a radio wave, transferring into the new body seamlessly. We've seen Zokin and Fate Stay Night pull this kind of crap, but his method left his soul vulnerable to degrade over time. The true magic of Heaven's Feel is all about materializing the soul without degradation, but the magecraft Roa is using seems to get the job done safely even without true magic. He's reincarnated 16 times over the past 800 years without issue. In order to get her stolen power back, Arkawade kills him every time before the church can respond, though it's not like either has a way of killing him for good. When Roa chooses his next vessel, he tends to go for people born into wealthy families, and it also helps that they have psychic abilities or magical potential. Even if the vessel grows up as a benevolent person, once Roa takes over, they are driven by evil urges. Rather than it being a direct possession, though, it's more like Roa manipulates his host's existing personality, and the more often he reincarnates, the less of his own original personality remains. Despite all that, Ciel blames Arkawade just as much for the city's troubles, carelessly hunting Roa without care for any humans that get caught in the middle. Even worse, she considers Arkawade the true enemy for being the one to drink Roa's blood in the first place. I mean, they haven't exactly shown us the full flashback of that moment, but as far as I understand it, Arkawade was kinda manipulated into drinking his blood, coerced by her naivete, as it were. Roa offered it to her in a cup, and she drank it vicariously. Ciel even knows about this, but insists on victim blaming. She's biased, though, explaining how true ancestors are literally meant to oppose how humanity defies nature with modern technology. Since true ancestors are avatars of the planet's will, nature spirits meant to protect the planet, humans are considered pests who pollute and corrupt the land. Humanity coexists on Earth only because the Earth permits us to, and the true ancestors serve to mediate that fine line. Ciel uses this reasoning to try and convince Shiki not to work with Arkawade anymore. While what Ciel is saying isn't exactly false, Shiki can't just toss away the positive experiences he's had with Arkawade. The more Ciel slanders her as a monster, the more inclined he is to defend her. Upset, Ciel argues with Shiki, even though she means well, truly believing Arkawade is just using him for his mystic eyes. He can't take any more of this, and jolts up in a tantrum, telling Ciel she should be thankful that Arkawade helped them when fighting Vlav. The two aren't making any progress, just getting angrier at each other. Shiki declares he'll happily continue hunting with Arkawade, saying she's more reliable than Ciel. In response, Ciel yells at him to get out, asserting that she has no intention of speaking to or helping such a foolish weakling like him. He storms out of the room, saying he doesn't need her. Out in the hallway, Shiki realizes he went too far, but isn't about to go back and apologize. Stubborn, he returns to the classroom and gives his curry bread and milk to Arihiko. Instead of confronting Shiki's anger, Arihiko instead just eats the bread in peace until the period ends. Eventually, school ends, and Shiki prepares to head home when suddenly, he gets an email from Noel asking him to come meet her at an abandoned factory. He goes to the address listed, ignoring how obviously suspicious the area seems. After hearing noise coming from the 4th floor, he works his way up a rusty staircase and opens the door at the top. Through the gap, he spots a pulsing light. Noel's there, and she invites him inside. Stepping further into the darkness, he comes upon a gruesome sight. The floor is wet, and a foul odor is in the air. Noel has prepared 2 vampires, both gagged and pinned to chairs with black keys. They're in intense, constant pain from being contained by barriers. Seems they've also been tortured a fair amount by Noel. She tells him to keep it a secret from Ciel, but she's found the 2 guys who kicked him from the elevator at Vlov's lair. As thanks for all his help, she says it's only fair he be able to witness their deaths. Noel removes the gags on the vampires, and their hoarse, damaged throats push out enough sound to beg for their lives. Denying their pleas, she takes out a jigsaw and dismembers one of them, starting from his fingers and working her way up to his shoulders. She relishes in his screams as she removes parts and even organs, shoving the pieces into a box. Leaving his ability to scream for last, she completely dissects the vampire, letting his cohort watch the whole thing in fright. Acting like this were totally normal, she tries to hand Shiki the jigsaw and offers to let him carve up the remaining vampire. Again, if you choose to do so, it leads to a bad end later on when he becomes unable to restrain his violent urges. For us, we say hell no. Rejected, she ridicules Shiki, suggesting he's used to this gory stuff and is just trying to act innocent. When he explains he doesn't kill vampires for fun and doesn't want to hurt vampires who leave humans alone, she scolds him for his sympathy. To her, all vampires are scum, and demonstrates her hatred by plunging another black key into the vampire's crotch. In a maniacal fit, she asserts that it's wrong to take pity on vampires just because they look like humans. Shiki shouldn't trust them even if they swear not to harm people. Fed up with his cowardice, Noel decides to do it herself. She approaches the vampire and takes pleasure in denying his cries for mercy. She even gets her own "this chair" moment, repeatedly telling him to die 25 times in a single quote. More brutally than before, she dismembers this vampire while screaming how all vampires are maggots that deserve to die. Getting impatient, she grabs her halberd and proceeds to drive it into the vampire over and over again, scattering meat and bones with each crushing swing. She asserts that she has to be this cruel because, like cockroaches, they just don't die like they should. Eventually, the pieces become unrecognizable to the point where she can't gather them in a box anymore. To her, vampires deserve to die miserably, begging for an end to their torment. With her rampage concluded, she abruptly returns to her cutesy demeanor, claiming she didn't mean to scare Shiki. Outside the factory, the 2 talk while strolling through the grim alleyway. Noel reasons that, ultimately, she and Shiki want the same thing, to protect the city from vampires. He asserts that he just wants to help Ciel, even though she doesn't want him involved. Like before, Noel thinks he has every right to kill vampires, since he has an aptitude for it. The 2 executors are not on the same page at all. To hammer that home, Noel begins to badmouth her colleague, elaborating that Ciel is a ruthless devil with no emotions. Apparently, executors don't tend to live very long given their line of work, yet Ciel has been dominating her job for 10 years. She started killing vampires when she was only 13 years old, and her dedication makes her just as much of a monster as the victim she hunts. As part of the burial agency, she is one of 7 agents working under a single director. To improve efficiency, they are granted the right to act freely, independent from the rest of the church. Ciel was the most active of the bunch, having once spent an entire year hiding out in some filthy sewers in Europe just to take down one of her targets. Noel insists Shiki not confuse Ciel for an ordinary human. Regardless, he can't help but see Ciel as someone who has more to her than just killing vampires. Noel, on the other hand, claims to be nothing like her partner. She's an ordinary person who came into the profession after spending years training in a monastery, and was only ever partnered with Ciel because the 2 share the same birthplace. When Shiki realizes this makes Ciel a lot older than she looks, Noel reveals that Ciel literally can't die no matter how battered or burnt she becomes. Ciel's body regenerates after incurring even the most extensive damage, making her seem more vampire than human. Between the 2, Noel is actually younger, serving under Ciel as an apprentice. In that regard, Noel insists that Ciel is just using Shiki for her own reasons. Their friendship is only a lie she implanted upon him with suggestion magecraft. It dawns on Shiki that his first real memory of her was when they were on the train at the start of the story. He never questioned why she didn't even go by a last name. Rather than giving him fake memories, however, Ciel merely gave him the suggestion not to question her identity or presence at school. That said, Noel plants doubts in him about whether Ciel's erased important memories of his, and that in order to keep it from happening again, he needs to keep this meeting a secret. Totally mind-blown, Shiki returns to the mansion. He rests in his bedroom, staring at the ceiling while processing all of this new information. Ciel tells him not to trust Arcoade, whereas Noel tells him not to trust Ciel. If Ciel's truly just trying to use him, however, why would she be so concerned about his relationship with Arcoade? He acknowledges that she isn't a bad person and genuinely cares for his safety. Even so, he can't abandon Arcoade either, so he intends to meet with her as usual. At night, he makes his way to the park and encounters Ciel along the way. It's obvious what he's trying to do, and she coldly asks that if he's such a big fan of Arcoade, he must be dreaming of becoming one of her minions or something. Shiki retaliates that if his body were strong enough to resist drinking people's blood, he'd be willing to become one of her vassals. Ciel is shocked by this confession, exclaiming how naive it is to sacrifice one's humanity just to save the city. Shiki understands, but he says he's not going to waver. He is sorry for his attitude in the tea ceremony room, though, and hopes to have a proper conversation about it later. She tells him not to worry about it. He didn't say anything wrong, and if he's made up his mind, she can't stop him. That said, she does start following him on his way to the park. She insists they just happen to be going the same direction. Hoping to throw her off his trail, he runs through the city, taking a different route. Just when he thinks he's lost her, she surprises the crap out of him, again. She just doubles down on the idea that she just happens to be going to the park, and Shiki can do nothing but play along. She sure is stubborn. As you might expect, this causes problems when the two arrive at the park. Trying once more to get Shiki to go home, she says that since he's in love with Arcoade, the two of them shouldn't be seen together. Shiki denies the accusation, but her point still stands. Arcoade's gonna be pissed to see them together. Sure enough, Arcoade arrives on the scene and antagonizes Ciel. Shiki is told to run, but it's too late for that. The two women stare each other down like pissed-off alley cats. Shiki's left watching as they taunt one another. He tries to step in, insisting they work together, only to get shut down by both sides. Ciel continues to accuse Arcoade of using her mystic eyes to manipulate him, giving Arcoade the chance to brag about their consensual partnership. Their bond is precious, and Arcoade considers him her fated person. Flustered, Ciel says that's ridiculous. Doubling down, Arcoade declares that, while she doesn't want to drink blood, she won't give Shiki's life to anyone else. Rather than this being a product of her bloodlust, she insists that it's a desire born from the joy he brings to her. She accepts that she was a fool once duped by Roa, but things changed when Shiki killed her. Now, she knows what it's like to live freely like humans do. Deviously, she asks if Ciel can express her feelings like she can, before biting into her finger and letting a drop of blood hit the ground. Suddenly, the surface beneath them turns crimson, blanketing the park in a shallow pool of blood. Ciel worries that a liberated true ancestor could be more threatening than any dead apostle. Arcoade declares she isn't interested in conquering the city, but she wouldn't mind taking a chance to defeat someone she considers a nuisance. Instantly, fighting breaks out. Arcoade leaps into the air, and when Ciel launches a barrage of black keys at her, she eagerly claws through them and rips into the ground, forcing Ciel to jump out of the way. Ciel confirms the danger, realizing it'll be difficult to fight a true ancestor in a public space with only her black keys. Even though these weapons are individually weak, however, their power can be increased tenfold if concentrated into a single point. Sadly, they're nothing when compared to Arcoade's brute strength. The best Ciel can do is use the keys to keep Arcoade at a distance. Arcoade mocks how the black keys are such dated weapons, but Ciel has found ways of improving them over the years. One form is the creation ceremony that creates a wall of flames. It's meant for lower-ranked vampires, but it can still serve to distract her opponent. She can also send out multiple black keys to rain down from above. Arcoade scatters them, which is actually part of the plan. The keys stab into the ground and form a barrier. Arcoade's too fast to fall for it, though, instead mocking Ciel for not bringing out heavier weaponry. Regardless, Ciel bides her time and finds a moment to kick Arcoade back into the barrier. Another 3 keys follow after, making the barrier even stronger. Knowing Arcuade's strength, Ciel has developed a counter technique called Tower Ring, which is a tower of light emulating the rigidity of Strasbourg Cathedral, the largest tower in the Middle Ages. Its combination of mass and prayers makes it impenetrable to the living. It should buy Ciel enough time to re-establish the cathedral Gothic fort she acquired as the idea blood from Cromclay Petastructure. It's the same field she trapped Vlav in, but now she plans to compress it even more tightly around Arcuade. Even after all of this, it's still not enough to contain a true ancestor. In a surge of aggression, Arcuade completely shatters the barrier and asserts that Ciel's going to have to get more serious if she wants to win. Sadly, Ciel was giving it her best, and now has no hope of a proper offense. It should have worked, but clearly Arcuade is even stronger now that she can tap into her emotions. Further away, Shiki watches the fight in amazement. He can barely keep up with their movements, but he can follow enough to tell that Ciel is in trouble. She can only hope to endure as Arcuade barrages her with continued strikes. Unable to stand by any longer, Shiki rushes in and tries to break up the fighting. Of course, he can't possibly win over Arcuade physically, especially now that she's pissed at him for aiding Ciel. She's serious about killing him if he chooses to intervene. Even though she doesn't care to harm humans, she acknowledges Shiki as someone worthy of her strength. It's not like he can see any of her death lines either, not that he wants to kill her again. Thus, while she commands him to stand down, he realizes he has to resolve this using reason and words. Arcuade, with her eyes aglow and ready to kill, only needs to hear one thing to stop in her tracks. Shiki shouts that if she doesn't stop, he'll hate her. That's it. Our sweet true ancestor doesn't want that, and just hearing the consequences nearly stuns her. Ciel begs him to use this chance to escape, since even with her immortality, she's too weak to continue fighting. Nevertheless, she still aims to protect him, even at her own expense. In a very Shiro-like move, Shiki decides to reject that sacrificial attitude, running to her aid instead. He loves her, and he'll be the one to protect her. Embarrassed, Ciel insists on being the protector, and as the two bicker about who should escape, Arcuade watches as they ignore her. Growing angry at being a third wheel, she dispels the blood on the ground and vents her frustrations. She calls off their partnership, stating that if he cares so much about Ciel, he shouldn't rely on her anymore. She announces she'll withdraw, but warns him that Ciel isn't the person he thinks she is. Arcuade cruelly says she hopes Ciel will drain him of all his blood. As Arcuade turns around, Shiki asks what she meant when she said she'd make him hers. Openly, she clarifies that was her saying she likes him. Feeling rejected, she leaps off, telling him not to come crying back to her. She disappears into the night sky, leaving behind a shimmer a la Team Rocket. After taking in this bizarre encounter, Ciel regains her composure and scolds Shiki for trying to save her. Trying to fight a true ancestor is suicidal. He admits it was dangerous, but affirms he couldn't possibly leave Ciel alone. He humbly thanks her for fighting for his sake, and she returns the sentiment. They were both just trying to save each other. In this calm state, they make up for their earlier fight in the tea ceremony room. The topic then changes to Ciel's wounds. Despite her being injured while fighting Arcuade, there's no more blood. Her wounds have completely vanished. Of course, he already knows why. Noel told him about her immortality. Thus, when Ciel looks uncomfortable, he tries to backtrack his remark by telling her not to worry about what Arcuade said. Ciel figures out that he heard about her body from Noel, and asks why he would try to protect her if he knew about her condition. Shiki reiterates that he didn't want her to die, which winds up pissing her off. After all, we happen to know that Ciel actually wants to die, but can't do so until Roa is well and truly dead. As such, she says Shiki's attempts to save her are annoying and selfish. With a cold bluntness, she declares she'd rather have died than be pitied. This comes as a shock to Shiki, who was taught by Aoko to value life. Ciel, on the other hand, agrees with what Arcuade said about her. She may not suck blood, but she still considers herself a monster. To demonstrate her point, she takes out a black key and, without hesitation, slices into her neck. She stands there, unaffected, as a spray of blood surges from the open cut. She tells him not to panic because, sure enough, her body heals. All the missing blood flows back into the wound, which closes up as though time had reversed. She hoped he'd never have to see her like this and apologizes for deceiving him. Now that her secret is out, she decides to take her leave, saying farewell as though it were the end of their days together. With a smile, she vacates the park, leaving Shiki all alone. Lost in his own thoughts, he heads back to the mansion, reasoning he really won't see her ever again. His headaches worsen as he staggers up to his bedroom. Collapsing onto the bed, he falls into a deep slumber. Rather than reading a book this time, he obtains Roa's memories directly through dreaming. In the dream, Roa is on the verge of death, contemplating his life thus far. He originally sought means of attaining bodily immortality, but found that such a thing is impossible for humans. Instead, humans become stronger through evolution, inheriting superior genes from their parents. Vampires, on the other hand, cannot reproduce. They can only spread by converting other humans to their side. For blood-related dead apostles to exist, they must be born human and then be converted into vampires afterward. Such is the case for Lord Rosé-N, a man who turned dead apostle along with his 2 daughters, one of whom we know is Rita Rosé-N. Sure, they could be considered family, but now that they're all vampires, none of them can have any more children biologically. Instead of inheriting genetics from their parents, dead apostles can inherit the idea blood or principles of their masters. This is why Roa chose to have Arcoade drink his blood. It allowed him to attain a cursed principle that his reincarnation manifests from. Being a vampire was merely a means to an end, his best shot at attaining eternity. As himself, Shiki dreams about Ciel. He cares for her, but isn't sure that he can face her anymore, not without making her sad. She calls herself a monster, but she saved him after he'd committed something truly atrocious. His dream is interrupted by Hisui, calmly waking him out of concern. Like last night, he still feels like hell, headaches aplenty, almost forgetting to wear his glasses again. She encourages him to rest, and he tries to act tough, but as soon as she leaves him to get changed, his head throbs enough for him to collapse. Pain assails him, as though a nail had been driven into his skull. It takes him a bit to calm down and focus on his main goal, hunting vampires. Part of that endeavor still involves going to school, so he sticks to what he's used to. He skips out on Kohaku's breakfast, instead choosing to grab something quick along the way. At the school's gate, he stands around hoping to find Ciel among the students. With less than 5 minutes before the gate shuts, though, he gives up and heads to class. Noel's still absent as well, with no substitute for homeroom. Shiki speaks with Arihiko about Ciel not showing up, only to find out that, once again, Arihiko no longer remembers who she is. Shiki takes this as a sign that Ciel really won't be coming back. Hoping to distract himself with some food, he goes to the cafeteria for lunch. When looking for a seat, he's surprised to find Ciel peacefully chowing down on some more curry udon. She's not exactly thrilled to see him, but this level of friction seems inevitable. He tries to figure out why she's here, but decides not to take it for granted. Getting to see her again is a dream come true. She calls that an exaggeration, but the whole bit with Arihiko really worried Shiki. When he brings up the definitive-sounding sayonara from last night, she downplays the issue, saying she just meant it was late out and they had to go home like good students. She stubbornly says her choice to go to school is separate from her relationship with him, and presumptuously asks if he thinks a monster like her shouldn't be allowed to attend school. Pessimistically, she assumes he probably hates her now that he's seen her ability, but that's not true at all. Rather, Shiki wants to affirm that no matter what she is, she's important to him all the same. He says that he still thinks of her as the cool-looking senpai who saved him when he was at his worst. She shouldn't put herself down so easily, because all he wants is for her to smile when all is said and done. She thanks him for the kind words, and together they establish that he's not hateful or afraid of her body being the way it is. They let it all slide with a handshake, easing the tension between them. With that out of the way, it's time to get back to business. Shiki wants to properly discuss the situation, and Ciel complies, even though it means skipping lessons. They return to the tea ceremony clubroom, and Ciel says they shouldn't have to worry about getting caught by any of the teachers. This leads Shiki to ask her about her relationship with Noel. He mentions how Noel is always singing her praises, backhandedly of course. At least at school, they appear to get along, but at night they act like enemies. Ciel clarifies that while she and Noel have been working together for years, they try to keep things professional. Shiki jokes it would be weird for a high schooler like Ciel to be hanging out with a 25-year-old woman anyway, which makes her freeze. Naturally, she's reluctant to admit that she's actually around the same age as Noel. That's our adorable cradle robber for ya. Changing topics, Shiki asks about the barrier Ciel used to contain Arcoade. It's the same method she used on Vlov, just on a different scale. She's embarrassed by how he calls it a special move like in a video game. Regardless, he enjoys the look on her face as he flatters her. Ciel is obviously way stronger than Noel, but it's not like she's the only member in the burial agency who can kick vampire ass. She name-drops Monsignor André Gobivouac, the second member of the agency, as a rather strange person. As for her barrier, she admits it's derived from the dead apostle of castle or kingdom. But unlike the original Idea Blood, she can only contain a single target, whereas the original could protect an entire fortress. That said, she's made it her own in that, conceptually, she can make the inside of her barrier a different size than its outward appearance. It's not a trick she can repeatedly pull off, however. Shiki then asks about the Black Keys, and Ciel is excited to talk about the fundamentals of her fighting. Invented as far back as the year 300 AD, Black Keys aren't actually swords at all, but rather burial rites given shape. Conventional weapons don't harm the dead, who are practically immortal, so the Church created Black Keys as a mass-produced armament to avoid having to confine and burn every vampire they encountered. They exorcise the dead by, in layman's terms, unlocking the door to their immortality. A corrupt vampire's soul may not comprehend the word of God, but the human body it inhabits can be returned when struck by the Black Keys, effectively separating a target's soul from its body. I love how Shiki looks like most of us trying to understand the Nasuverse. Some self-awareness for all these long-winded exposition dumps. Anyway, the Black Keys are literally pieces of scripture shaped into handles that, when invoked with mana, enter a baptism state that happens to resemble a sword. Depending on the skill of the user, Black Keys can take various forms, each with their own unique purposes. I like how she references Magecraft and the Association as if Shiki knows anything about that. Anyway, over time, the Black Keys have been seen as antiquated by more modern technology, like bringing a bow and arrow to a gunfight. Even so, Ciel stands by them as one of the most useful weapons because of how portable they are. If you can just get good, you won't have to worry about smuggling weapons through immigration or running laborious maintenance. At least, that's what the agency's cardinal, Noi Seonator Gran Fatima, preaches. Since all of this has gone right over Shiki's head, he simply responds with style, as suave as he can. To tease her for the long lecture, he calls out that there's some kind of black bug behind Ciel. Alarmed, she jolts up from her seat, showing off her lovely legs. Continuing to appreciate the view, he asks her about her different combat uniforms. For general use, members of the burial agency dress in religious habits in order to present themselves as people who protect victims and help the needy. The idea is not to intimidate people, so in this outfit, she isn't usually equipped with any heavy weaponry. Shiki compliments the nice boots, saying they look great on her. Trying to remain humble, she talks about Virgin Pain, the armor she used when fighting Vlov. It was supposed to protect her from practically anything, but it can be damaged when her mana is low. Even with the outer layer shattered, her skin-tight bodysuit is designed to withstand hits from Arcoade's claws, serving as an all-purpose defensive solution. Whoever built that thing is a man, or woman, of culture. Sadly, it's currently being repaired, so she can't use it anytime soon. From Shiki's perspective, he's just glad it looks attractive and cool on her. Ciel urges him to take this more seriously, so the topic finally moves on to Arcoade. Treading on eggshells, Shiki again asserts that Arcoade isn't an enemy. Because they're both trying to protect the city, they should consider working together, or at the very least, avoid fighting each other. Stubborn as ever, Ciel refuses, reminding Shiki that Arcoade nearly killed him last night. Ciel, after everything that's happened, doesn't want Shiki involved, which makes him sad considering he's become so invested in vampires. He doesn't want to be treated as someone unrelated to the matter because he's long since made up his mind to fight alongside her. Ciel admits that even with his anemia, he's a powerful ally with his decent athleticism and mystic eyes. What worries her more is his lack of self-importance. She reveals that she scoped out his bod when he changed clothes at her apartment and thought he had a nice build, leading him to call her out for peeking. Her face turns red as she tries to make excuses. Shiki uses her reasoning as leverage to allow him on the case. Ciel's established that he can protect himself if he's not on his own, but demands he not partner with Arcoade. Roa aside, Arcoade's the most dangerous threat to the city, an unstable variable who could explode like a bomb if provoked. Before, she had a responsibility, a code to follow as a true ancestor, but now she's no longer upholding it, preferring to act on her emotions. Ciel admits she provoked some of that conflict, but at the same time, it's not just something she can blissfully ignore. Taking Ciel's concerns into account, Shiki proposes she join him on his hunts instead. This seems to go over well, and the two enjoy a relaxing break over tea. The class periods pass by, and 6th period is about to begin. When Shiki tries to stand up, however, he's struck with dizziness and collapses again. He tells Ciel not to worry, but it's obvious he's just trying to act okay. Ciel takes care of him, offering some ginger milk tea as he rests. She learned to make it from her father, who prepared it when she wasn't feeling well. Too late to rejoin class, they decide to skip the rest of the day, joking how they're acting like Arihiko. To break some silence, Ciel asks if Shiki wants to play Shiritori. She playfully admits she'd like to see his crying face, a vulnerable side he rarely shows anyone. I suppose teasing him is the next best thing. More time passes, and she clarifies that she was actually just trying to distract him. She assumes that, ever since his accident 7 years ago, he must be afraid that each day might be his last. His health could fail him at any moment, and instead of showing his fear, he acts brave. She confesses that she admires that bravery. While she can't do much, she vows to be there for him, offering a hand to hold should that fear grow too much to endure. Comforted, he accepts her offer. Since he never got compensated for fighting Vlav, Shiki asks Ciel to tell him about her past, no matter how boring she might think it is. We already know a lot of this, but Ciel was born in France, her father ran a bakery, and her mother was Japanese. She's been fighting the dead since she was 12 years old, but this is the first time she's infiltrated a school. She claims the reason she joined the burial agency was because it was an effective way to use her immortal body and not let it go to waste. Like Shiki, she wasn't born with such a crazy power. She gained it after being killed by a vampire. Once more, Shiki affirms it doesn't bother him. He loves his precious senpai. She, however, thinks her body is creepy. Shiki lays down some more praise, reminding her how brave she was when fighting Vlav. He considers it an inspiration, but she doesn't think it's brave at all. She doesn't fear death because there's no consequence. Pain is something she's long since gotten used to. It's nothing compared to Shiki's resolve, since he's actually putting himself at risk to fight. In fact, Ciel says she accepts her pain as penance for the many lives she took in the past. The mood lightens when the final school bell rings. Now that the two are a team, they decide to head home and reunite later in the evening. Ciel's excited to teach Shiki about vampire hunting, but considers there might not be much time left. Based on the number of dead still left in the city, it should only take a week or so to exterminate them all. This saddens him, since he figures she'll move on to her next assignment right afterward. Ciel explains that's just a matter of taking out the lesser vampires. It's still going to take some time to kill Roa. Right here, shit hits the fan. Shiki already knows Roa was killed by Arcoade. He thought Ciel also knew about it, but clearly not. He fills her in, and the air goes cold. Naturally, she's reluctant to accept this, not because she thinks anyone's being a liar, but because it's something she needs to confirm with her own eyes. Thankfully, Arcoade already told Shiki Roa's lair was beneath the school. The moment Ciel hears this, she sets off to check for herself, telling Shiki to stay put. Considering they just agreed to work together, Shiki insists on coming along. Ciel allows him to do so, but only after promising to keep a cool head and follow her orders. To get below the school, they decide to enter the sewer system. Ciel specifies that this is a reconnaissance mission, and that if they encounter any major threats, they'll retreat and prepare for a more armed assault. Entering the sewer with lights will give them away, so they have to navigate in the dark. Ciel will lead, given she can implement night vision, and has him follow her while holding hands. In this manner, they proceed through the tunnel for about 20 minutes before coming upon a smashed-up wall. Apparently, this is where Arcoade had entered earlier, exposing a room that wasn't on the sewer's map. Inside is a lair very much akin to Vlav's beneath the department store. Sure enough, Ciel finds the remains of Roa's heartless corpse. Rather than relief, she appears worried. Even though Roa's soul can't be killed through normal means, destroying his current body should cause all of his low-ranking minions to perish shortly after, often causing media to report findings of discovered bodies. The fact that the dead are still alive means that either they aren't actually Roa's minions, or Roa's presence still lingers in the city somehow. The moment Ciel comes to this realization, Noel appears, having followed them. In an eerie tone, Noel suggests that Roa's corpse is a fake, that perhaps his true vessel has been Shiki all along. She steps into the light, brandishing her halberd to intimidate him. It's frightening having that unhinged woman direct her anger at him. Noel assumes Ciel lured him here as a trap, intentionally pissing Arcuate off so she wouldn't interfere. Noel suggests they work together to kill Shiki, claiming to have proof that he is indeed a vampire. Hearing all of this, Ciel simply hesitates, making him worry even more. He almost believes Noel when she explains that the Tonos are the only family in town that meets the criteria for Roa's incarnations. Assuming he's the rightful male heir, she declares his guilt. Nonetheless, Shiki says he's never met Roa and can't possibly be the vessel. Noel realizes this is just what it was like for Ciel when she was possessed, and begins to laugh uncontrollably. From what they experienced in France, the host doesn't have to be aware of Roa's presence until it's too late. Noel reasons this validates her theory, asserting that Shiki's mystic eyes and remarkable instincts in combat indicate that he's had the nature of a vampire all along. Declaring she can't possibly forgive Roa, Noel draws out and hurls a spiked black key toward him. Before it can strike, Ciel jumps forward and deflects the attack. She exercises her authority, ordering Noel to stand down. Shiki being the host is unverified, and she cannot allow anyone innocent to be killed without investigation. Instead of obeying, Noel retaliates, once again trying to slay Shiki. Ciel interrupts, kicking her colleague into the nearest wall. Ciel offers to overlook Noel's behavior if she repents for violating her discipline. According to Ciel, if Roa were inside Shiki, they might still have some time to save him before Roa fully awakens. Noel rejects this, claiming the matter was decided the instant a new host was chosen. Without mercy, she continues to rebel. Before she can charge in again, however, one of Ciel's black keys strikes her in the shoulder and surges with electricity. Noel screams as her body is repeatedly shocked. The blade remains in her shoulder, and one of her legs goes completely paralyzed. Having lost without much effort at all, she's told to go find Mario and get her injury healed up. Moaning in both pain and frustration, she slowly drags herself out of the room. This leaves Ciel and Shiki to discuss the accusation. Ciel argues on his behalf, introducing the fact that the dead body right next to them indeed belongs to the eldest son of the Tonos. Her research shows that the family had 2 male sons, one of whom was adopted. Despite reports of one of the boys dying 7 years ago, it appears that boy was actually hosting Roa this whole time. Naturally, neither of them have reason to think that our Shiki's the adopted child. Furthermore, Shiki appears to be totally fine walking around in the sunlight. Her confidence on the matter reassures him, though they're both ignoring some massive red flags. After incinerating Roa's body, Ciel and Shiki make their way back to the surface. Ciel is convinced that this incarnation of Roa is truly gone, meaning her job in this city is officially complete. That said, she still has to continue hunting Roa, and decides to tell Shiki more about her past. She starts by asking what he'd think if she were a vampire, perhaps unaware of it all this time. Without hesitation, he says he'd still love her anyway. She plays it off as a hypothetical before announcing she won't be erasing his memories. Furthermore, she wants to tell him the true reason she's after Roa, that she needs to kill him in order for her body to return to normal. If she wants to die a normal death, killing Roa comes first. Now that it's really time for goodbye, she wants to end things with Shiki with a smile. Thanking him for making her truly happy, she shakes his hand and tells him to get along with Arihiko, as well as to keep his glasses on to avoid getting into more trouble. With that, their hands unravel, and Ciel steps away. Shiki asks if they'll ever see each other again, and she declares they will so long as they keep living. He can't think of anything else to say, and watches as she leaves his view. He struggles to accept that the two of them are just from different worlds, and that parting was an inevitability. With this bittersweet resolution, he heads back to the mansion. Despite all that's happened tonight, he gets home just past 9 p.m. Of course, this is still past curfew, so he asks Kohaku if Akiha is still awake. Luckily, she's already retired for the night, so he doesn't have to hear a lecture about his absence. While he's at it, he also asks Kohaku if he ever had an adopted brother growing up. She gleefully states that Shiki and Akiha were the only siblings. She knows because she's been working at the mansion ever since they were all children. Surprised, Shiki admits he doesn't remember Kohaku from back then, and is ashamed to have forgotten. She justifies his poor memory due to the fact that he was a child in a large building filled with various guests and relatives. Sadly, we know what was really going down at the time, but that's not a conversation for today. Perhaps Akiha knows more details, but since the matter is over, he lets it be and heads to sleep, trying his best to prepare himself for an ordinary school life in the morning. Meanwhile, Noel is still wallowing in her misery. Still injured by Ciel's black key, she scrambles toward the remains of Flav's lair with a paralyzed leg. As such, she trips over the rubble and falls into the pit, all while that ominous spider watches. She's got nowhere left to run, because going back to the church for help is akin to suicide. She'd be sent to a monastery and eliminated once they find out she's been bitten. Noel curses her fate and laments how she lost against Ciel so easily. Even after all these years of training, she couldn't even narrow the gap between their respective skills. She considers all of her efforts so far to be futile. There's no way she could have hoped to compete with someone inhuman like that. The idea that Ciel, who has committed so many atrocities, can go unpunished just because she's strong irritates Noel to no end. If only Noel were strong enough, she could deliver the punishment Ciel deserves. In tears, she calls out for God's help, and her prayers are answered by a quirky woman. It's Dr. Araku, acting as unhinged as usual. She notes that Noel has found a crappy place to hide from the church, and asks about her desire for strength. Araku offers to help provide that strength, but Noel cries that an ordinary person like her can't possibly get strong enough. Araku latches on to the whole ordinary person angle, declaring Noel still has a chance to get strong. In fact, it's quite easy. All Noel has to do is become a vampire. She thinks this is a reference to being bitten by Flav, but apparently that's got nothing to do with it. Turns out, Noel doesn't even have the talent to become a vampire in the first place. As such, the bite meant nothing. That said, Araku has ways of making even an ordinary person into a vampire. Without warning, Noel finds herself pulled to the ground, tied up by white threads. Seductively, Araku leans on Noel while licking her lips. Unable to contain her excitement, Araku declares this the first clinical trial of the procedure. Ignoring Noel's cry to escape, Araku injects her with a strange fluid. Just a few minutes later, Noel's body has completely transformed. Even as she moans incoherently, it seems her desire for revenge still remains. With a higher-pitched voice than before, she thanks Araku for her treatment, but it's clear she's still not strong enough. To remedy this, Araku has more injections. She reveals the syringes she has prepared, describing them as replica idea blood. In exchange for horrible pain, each dose will raise Noel up a rank as a vampire. By the way, this is remarkably similar to the syringe the doctor tries to use on you at school if you choose the painful vaccine. Anyway, Araku has up to 6 ampules of this stuff, so it's only a matter of how much agony Noel can endure. After some hesitation, Noel grabs all 6 and proceeds to stick the first one into her heart. Her blood vessels surge, and the pain drives her to tormented screams. She continues into the night, gathering the strength to continue her vampiric transformation, one injection at a time. Another night, another dream. We've seen this one a bunch by now, though. It's Shiki in the forest, mistakenly thinking he killed the other Shiki. This time, however, the scene shifts to Arcuate under the moonlight. It's from Roa's perspective, with him watching gloriously as the princess of the true ancestor stands covered in the blood of her own kind. Roa's been simping after Arcuate all this time because he thinks that, through her, he can see eternity. Shiki wakes up and confirms it's a Friday. In a foul mood, he hurries Hisui out of the room when she comes to greet him. Immediately afterward, he realizes how rude that was, and doesn't really understand what compelled him to act that way. Still unable to taste Kohaku's cooking, he endures breakfast and meets up with Akiha in the sitting room. She brings up his breach of curfew, and he explains he took some time to rest at the park since he wasn't feeling well. He could have called to get picked up, but claims it wasn't that urgent. He admits Akiha has more important things to worry about as the head of the family, and offers to help her out. Now that he's done taking care of things after school, he wants to devote himself to being a proper heir to the Tonos. This sudden change in attitude confuses her, but it's definitely not something she's gonna reject. To celebrate his commitment, Akiha wants to hold a welcome party on Sunday. Still sluggish, Shiki makes his way to school and finds Arihiko in the classroom. More surprising is that Satsuki Yumizuka is back, attending classes after a long absence. She says that she got injured, so her father had her stay home while the murders in town were still occurring. With no recent news of killings, she's permitted to return to school. This is a new development, because in all the routes of the original game, Satsuki winds up being bitten by Shiki Tono, and miraculously becomes an autonomous vampire capable of acting on her own. Here, she seems to have avoided that entirely, though we can't say for sure what she's been up to all this time. While she's happy to be back, she does notice something about our Shiki has changed, and asks if anything happened to him while she was gone. He denies there being anything noteworthy, prompting her to mention that before she got injured, she thought she saw someone who looked like him. She called out to this boy, only to realize it was someone else who ran away in a hurry. At the very least, she's convinced the two of them walk similar. Regardless, Shiki is happy to see her back, and the school day continues without incident. After everyone else has gone home for the day, Shiki lingers at the school gate and absorbs this mundane atmosphere free of vampires. The sunset reminds him of blood, triggering his headaches to return. A moment later, they subside, and he returns to the mansion. In the lobby, he calls out to Hisui and finds her working on something. Perhaps remodeling, she carries a chair, but puts it down for a moment to welcome him home. Sure enough, she's rearranging some furniture, and says she'll come check up on him in his room a bit later. Before heading up, Shiki decides to drink some tea in the dining room. On his way out, he accidentally hits his knee on the chair Hisui placed along the wall. This triggers in him a sudden fit of rage. Irrationally, he thinks his free time has been ruined by Hisui's negligence. In anger, he kicks the chair, only hurting himself more. Absolutely losing his shit, he takes the chair and starts slamming it around. This chair, 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 this chair. Sadly, since this is inside Shiki's mind, he doesn't actually say it out loud. Damn. Anyway, his violent tantrum frightens Hisui, and her reaction snaps him out of it. In fact, he isn't even aware of his own rampage, surprised to find himself out of breath beside the shattered chair. The thought of his body moving on its own like that makes him panic. Even worse, the way Hisui looks at him reminds him of the way doctors and nurses eyed him 7 years ago at the hospital, treating him like some kind of psycho. Hisui tries to calm him down, but he instead shouts to be left alone and retreats to his room. Collapsing onto the bed, he tries to stave off the agony of his headaches. His brain throbs, provoking his anger even more. Normally, this only happens when he takes off his glasses for a while, but it's getting worse. Unable to handle the sound of even the clock ticking on the wall, he smashes it, taking solace in the silence. To escape further stimuli, he falls asleep, only to wake up after midnight. He's hungry, having skipped dinner. To sate his hunger, he goes out into the city and witnesses another vampire on a killing spree. This young girl devours several people without mercy, unsatisfied by just one victim. It's clear she's relishing in their anguish. At this moment, Shiki is being taken over by Roa. If you chose to take the painful vaccine, you get a game over here because Shiki can no longer resist. In our case, though, Shiki listens to Roa's philosophy on eating humans being totally natural and objects, avoiding the worst-case scenario. The girl he was watching from afar is, of course, Noel, though we still don't get to see her new form yet. We just know she's having a blast. Not partaking in the festivities, Shiki returns to the mansion and finds Mario along the path. He's aware that Roa is still lingering inside Shiki, which he appreciates as another opportunity to obtain Roa's research on immortality. As such, he plans to stick around until Roa fully awakens. It's a miracle considering Roa could never transfer souls in such a way before. Apparently, this is possible by adopting techniques originating from Eastern vampires, the stealing of life force without transferring blood at all. So yeah, Roa's inside Shiki, voicing his will directly now. Shiki's able to resist it to an extent, confronting that voice with his own. At this point, though, Roa looks at the Tono mansion and states he hasn't been back here in 8 years. As you can see, we're building up to the insane climax of Ciel's route. I can't guarantee it, but my current goal is to cover her normal ending in the next video, and leave the true ending for its own grand finale. With each release of this series, though, fewer and fewer people seem to be watching, so please consider supporting me directly or sharing this video as much as you can. Before I go ahead and roll the credits, I want to give a special shout out to my $10 supporters: Video Gamer 75, Samuel Gersten, Stephen Elak, Otaku Mom, Jens Bauman, Mystic Samurai 1983, Freebrick, RNG or Shuffles 1498, Happy, and SF Giants fan Mike. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching.
If you enjoy this channel, help us grow by liking, commenting, sharing the video, subscribing to Otaku Daikun, and
most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all of our anime discussion, lore, or Let's Play content.
You can support us directly through Patreon, Subscribestar, or our YouTube membership, all of which come with benefits like exclusive vids and early access.
As always,
Celebrate your fandom!